Okay, tonight we are honored to have Hector Velasquez from Resilient Youth Therapy, right?
Yep.
I keep saying youth. Again, Resilient Youth Therapy. And he's going to talk to us about a very important subject. It's an uncomfortable subject, but it's something that needs to be addressed. I'm going to turn the mic over, or the floor over to Hector. Yep.
All right. This is going to be a barn burner. We talk about suicide. Just real quick. Oh, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay. Just a little bit about me. I've been a therapist in San Diego for 6 years. Before that, I was a, can you see me? I'm sorry. Before that, I was a special ed teacher, behaviorist, substitute teacher, you name it, coach. So I've been working with suicide and suicidality for probably 20 years. And most recently with teens at an outpatient facility in Serrano Valley. During COVID, we lost 4 patients, the youngest being 12. So this is a near and dear subject to my heart, and it's unfortunate, but it touches everyone's life. There's nobody that gets unscathed by something like suicide, okay? We'll go through real quick and we'll just kind of hit some of the topics. I know James contacted a friend of mine, Brandy. She works with frontline workers, which frontline workers have a high propensity for suicide as well, just because of the job they do. Doctors, nurses, and the like. Firefighters, police officers as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. That you guys lost a colleague or a member to the group a while back, and so this is something that he wanted to bring up. As I look in the crowd, I see one of the most at-risk populations, which if you've done any Googling, the CDC is pretty good on their numbers, which is over the age of 64 white males. Anybody got any ideas of why that is? Just tired? Stress?
Probably because there's more of us in the population, just percentage-wise.
It could be, yeah. Not married. Not married. We'll get to support, yeah. One of the biggest reasons is all of those, and the fact that there's more lethal means. So completion is a higher success rate. And so you look at the other groups, and there's a big gap between 64 and up, or actually if you go down to 35 and up for white men because of their means of lethality. So if you look at the population like women, they'll try to poison or they'll try to hang themselves, and they're unsuccessful. Unfortunately, what that tells us is that the majority of people who attempt suicide aren't actually trying to kill themselves. What are they really looking for? Help? What else? Anybody else?
Sympathy?
I'm sorry? Attention? Okay. Anybody else? It's a cry for help.
Sympathy.
They don't know what to do, right? So all the research points us in the direction of pain. And that's a common across all walks of life. Every one of us has some sort of pain. We have loss, we have grief. But what happens is there comes a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And what we do in my field is we take those people who are brave enough to be able to give us a call and set up the appointment, and we sit down with them and we hold space for them in order for them to let go of some of that pain. But remember, the reason why suicide is likely, or why we would end up there, is because we don't have a place to put that pain. We just drag it around with us. And so anecdotally, my guess is for that population that we talked about with the most lethal means, is it's easier to do that than it is to ask for help. How many of us would agree with that? Right? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to shed a little bit of light on some of the stigmas, some of the preventative things that we can do. And essentially it's this. It's someone like James giving a shit about the rest of us to say, let's talk about this. Because this isn't something, my guess is, the majority of us as men, not to exclude females, but the majority of us as men, these aren't topics that we talk about in our homes growing up as kids. I don't see any disagreeing faces, right? Myself included. I grew up with a very traditional Latin father, and we don't talk about feelings. Even now, he asks me, what do? You talk about people's feelings? No, Papi, I don't, it's not, never mind. Just pass the rice, okay, we'll just keep eating. So again, and I come across this with most men that come into my practice, and after they meet me and they see that I'm not as traditional as well, how does that make you feel? Oh, how does that make you, oh, really? Oh. And all of that we have the stereotypes of, and we talk about real issues for real people, dealing with real shit out there. I don't know if you guys have seen out there in the world, right? We have to have some place to go with this, especially for these populations that are at risk. In good company, these populations that we're talking about at risk are the trans community. Whatever your political stuff is with that, they're at risk. Teens are at risk. The elderly are at risk. Military, former military, high risk. Not only do they know how to use a weapon, they probably have a bunch of them. Okay? And then they come back from wherever they came from with all kinds of trauma. But where do they put it? Well, we've seen all the stories, we see the news, we see American Sniper, we've seen all the stuff, right? If we could just shed light on this, then maybe we can reduce those numbers. But the numbers are staggering. So I'm just going to hit you with just a few numbers. Okay? If I can find them. Oh, here they are. So this is taken from the CDC in 2021. We're just now in the world of therapy, we're just now seeing the residual effects of COVID on families, kids, adults, the gamut, especially the frontline workers. So in 20 and 21, there were 38 male suicides, 9,000 from females, just in the US. 38,000 males, 9,000 females. I'm not the math major, but that is two ridiculously separate numbers, okay? The highest being 36,000 of them being from the white population. 36 out of the 38. So then they spread those up over the different ethnicities and races in the rest of the US. So if you're sitting out there and you fit into that category, or you have friends or families that fit into that category, we gotta keep an eye on it, okay? And then like I said, we talk about the other groups. Latinos made up about 5,000, give or take. And then we have over the age of 65, which is at about 10,000, okay? Obviously, 50% of the population is men, but they account for 80% of the suicides. That's staggering. And again, if you look on this as a whole, the number isn't major, it's like 3%. But if one of my family members was one of that 40,000, I'd be really upset. I'd be really hurt. Especially if I had the tools, after listening to my face, give you the tools. And say, okay, well, even if I don't, I got a guy's number, I can call him and see what he says. Maybe he can point me in the right direction, okay? So that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about you have to put on your cape and, jump in and save somebody. We're just saying you have to have the information in order to direct someone to where they can go and hold space, all right? You guys with me? Okay. So we talk about some of the things that suicide is. What are some of the stigmas that we have around suicide that you guys are aware of? Just in pop culture.
That it's just an attitude.
That you could just snap out of.
It's abrupt.
It's abrupt. Okay.
You mean like you wouldn't suspect it happening to somebody like
Okay, that could be a stigma, right? That you wouldn't suspect, Henry from next door.
that?
I've known him for 30 years. He's been my neighbor. We barbecue all the time. He was just quiet and nice, and one day his wife came home and he was dead.
How often is that?
38,000 times. Yeah. I think one of the stigmas that we have, or the misnomers about suicide, is that there has to be this grand production. But most people who live with pain, and I'll go back to being a man, you're not telling your friends. We're drinking at the bar. And I'm pushing all of that pain down. But then when my buzz wears off and I have to go back to work and I realize when I was a kid my dad used to beat the shit out of me, it still bothers me even as a grown-ass man. But when my wife left me and she cheated on me with my brother, broke up the whole family. Or trauma, whatever the trauma was that occurred in your life, and you're carrying it around with you. Eventually, the pain gets so great that we do something, and we make a permanent decision for temporary pain. And the reason why I say that phrase is because, not because it doesn't mean anything, that the pain can just go away, but over time, and with help, the pain can go away. Or at least it can be managed to a point where we're not loading a gun and saying, this is the only answer that we have. Is there any other nope, there's no other possible answer. It's only this. And as I look out here, I see you going, I guess that makes sense. Right? At some point they say, this is the only way the pain will go away. And we know that that's not true. Okay? But they don't. They're the one that didn't pull their hand off the fire. They left it on there. Okay? So when we talk about this, we talk about the stigmas. We talk about not being able to talk about it. Or talking about it and people saying what? Whatever, you're not gonna do that. Don't say that, don't talk like that. Being dismissive, invalidation. These are ways that it's harmful, right? Again, whether or not they're going to do something isn't the point. The fact that they're thinking about doing it is enough for us to act, if we truly care about the people around us. Because if we do, we'll do something. But a lot of times and this is where all of the other parts of the stigma come in. I wish I would have said something. I wish I would have done something. The regret comes in. I don't know that there's anything that we could have done. We think there is, because this impacts us. But if we would have thought about it, perhaps we would have been there in the beginning and would have said, hey, I see you're drinking a lot more nowadays. After the divorce, is everything okay? That's as simple as a preventative measure. That's it. I was there and I noticed something, so I said something. But these topics are so uncomfortable that you'd rather live with the regret than live with the maybe I was wrong. Not me. I don't give a shit. If I approach a friend who is having a tough time, and this is not because I was a therapist, this is not because I have the tools and skills, this is because I would rather them live a long life hating the shit out of me than me living one day with regret of like, maybe I could have just been nicer. Or maybe I could have just been like, hey, let's go have a drink. So that's on the simplest level that we could do this. But before hopefully we leave tonight, you guys have a couple more tools in your belt to be able to kind of go out and see things and help people. Because that's really what this is about. So when we talk about suicide and suicidality, there are cases where we can look at protective factors. You guys know what a protective factor is?
No.
A protective factor is this. You have a consortium of people at any given time that you can go to about your craft. I don't know how this pooled system, I have no idea about this, works. So I'm going to call James because he knows, or he knows somebody who knows. That's support. That's support in any realm. Or you need to talk to somebody about a customer service issue. I'm sure there's people who are amazing with customer service. So I'm not, so maybe they would be and they could help me. That's support. This is no different. If we can identify that we need support and it looks like there's faces here that are friendly, then maybe I'd be more likely to reach out if I have a community. That's a protective factor. Church would be a protective factor. Parts of a sports team, having a spouse. You said there's no spouse, right? That's not a protective factor. Having a spouse is a protective factor. Unless it's toxic, and then it's kind of like, maybe we should go to couples therapy. I'll have cards at the end of the presentation. But the idea is the same, right? If we have support, if we have community, and then there's one that doesn't get talked about a lot. And it seems like this is kind of the group that could possibly understand this in a very real way. Purpose. I was talking to Paul, right? And I asked him what he kind of missed about doing pools in his retirement. And he said, just being outside. Being outside in nature, right? That could be protective. But having purpose, having something that you can go to. And each one of you here tonight, for your reasons for being here, there's a purpose behind it. And your job, your career that you've chosen, the trajectory of your life that's taken, has brought you success or struggle or whatever it is, there's purpose behind it. Either I have to pay these bills because I live in San Diego and it's hell expensive, or I'm providing because I have a family and I love that family, I want them to have more than I had, or I just like seeing the smile on that lady's face when I clean her pool and unclog the filter, whatever the spa, have them to have a nice night with the spa. Purpose is a huge indicator of being a protective factor. So if we have purpose, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a job, but I go back to that at-risk population, which is over the age of 65, white males. We see this a lot. What happens is, I'm from the Midwest. I'm a Michigan guy. I'm a Detroit guy. My dad would tell me stories that they would take guys out of stretchers from General Motors. Days or hours before they're supposed to get out of there. They would literally drop dead because they realized their purpose is over. Now, obviously, their health was probably pretty poor too, so all around they weren't taking care of themselves. But again, purpose can pull us to safety. But if we're being pushed or we're being dragged, that's not a recipe for long-lasting results, positive results. So when we think about things like protective factors, we can also think about purpose. Okay? Another thing is access to mental health. How many of you are your own bosses? And you provide your own health care? Right? So if you're looking down the bill of taking care of that mole on my back that keeps getting bigger every year, that my wife's yelling at me about, or going to see a therapist, I'm pretty sure you're going to take care of the mole first. So mental health access is a huge thing. And so there's tons of programs out there that you can be a part of through the state of California or Medicare or Medi-Cal, all of these things out there so that these companies now are starting to take, which is really helpful. Okay? Even in the marketplace for the state of California, there's really good deals that you can get, and you can select what it would look like to get your own just mental health care. And then the rest of it's just kind of, doctor's visits and whatnot. So the other piece of this would be access to healthcare, or mental health care, okay? So I really think that when we look at protective factors, we can't look further than what we can afford. And that's an unfortunate thing in our country. We can't look past that because it is expensive. Because I also have to feed my family. I also have to pay my mortgage, and I have to put gas in the truck. Ugh. But all of these things are real things, okay? So when you're looking for that, there's a thing called a sliding scale. And if you really are looking for help and need help, therapists have at it's their own discretion to use a sliding scale, meaning whatever your income is, and then we'll take that into consideration, okay? You guys with me? Any questions so far? No? It's all making kind of sense? Okay. All right. One of the things before we get into the preventative topic is the way we talk about suicide. Now, what I come up against a lot, especially with parents, when I was working with parents specifically, it was very uncomfortable. So they would have this kind of strange laugh. It's like an uncomfortable laugh when they talk about suicide. After losing students, clients, patients, family members to suicide, I've yet to find what's funny about it. And then I did a little bit more digging. And I started interviewing some of these parents, and I'd ask them. And what I found was that because it was uncomfortable, the thought of them losing their child, that it was incongruent for them and how they reacted with what they were feeling. So there was terror inside, but they had to make it look okay. like it wasn't a big deal. And I thought, if they're feeling that way, how is the kid supposed to know that they're a safe person to go to? So, one of the ways that we do that is with reparative language. So when we talk about certain things like suicide, we're not asking questions about details. Do we really want to know? No. What do you want your loved one to know if they're coming to you for help? It's the only thing that matters. That you love them. Absolutely. That you're safe. Because I can almost guarantee, especially in the teen world, that they've gone to their friends. That they've gone to their teachers. And they've gone to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And nothing was safe as mom and dad. Or auntie, uncle, somebody. An adult figure in their life. That transcends to being adults. If your brother or your sister or your cousin or your child or your best friend comes to you, we have to be able to have the language to receive that, even if it's so uncomfortable. So this is what it might look like. I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't want to hear about this shit because it scares me that you're saying this, and then if you do this, and then it's not about me. So we're just going to shelf our anxiety for just a second. And when I say hold space, what I mean is be present. Be right there in that spot with them. I'm right here with you tonight. You have my undivided attention. Because that's important for me to model as a therapist. Also as a human, as a father, as a husband, as a son. That I give a shit about you. That I care about your life. Even though I don't know you. And that I'm a safe person for you to be able to talk about these things. So how we hold space is like this. I hear you. I see you. That's it. That's it. And for the men out there who are married, you say those two things to your wife when she's trying to talk to you. No arguments. I hear you, hon, and I see you. I'm all in. There's no arguments. I do couples therapy, and I've been ramping up, and that's one of my go-to interventions. So hold on to that. You can have that one for free. But when we hold space for the people around us, then we become that beacon. Now, they go, okay, I'm good now. Thanks to the pep talk, I'm good. And they go away, and the problems don't go away because you're not a deity. You don't have divine intervention. You're just a human trying to do the best things that you can do. And so then that person comes back and they say, well, remember when I talked to you about that thing? I'm having it again where I'm really thinking about hurting myself. That's when you say, okay, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to be right here with you to find it. Where do we see that language? Where else do we see that language? Where else will we use that line?
When you go to a doctor, like when you might have a problem, you don't know what's going on.
That's right. And the doctor says, you know what, we'll do some tests and we'll figure it out. Where else might we see that language? Any parents out there? With your kid? No, I have no idea how big the circumference of the earth is. I really don't. I was bad at math or science. I was bad at both of them. But let's find out together. I'm here with you. I'm in this moment with you, and we can tackle this. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to leave you because it's too scary for me. It's never too scary because I got you because you're here, and I want to keep you here. Okay? A lot of times, for people who are thinking or have intrusive thoughts of suicide, just showing up can minimize the impact of those thoughts on their actions. Okay? And that's why working with teens in an outpatient facility, we can watch that happen. And what would you think was the catalyst of them continuing to have some of these suicidal thoughts? That wasn't mental illness. That wasn't like bipolar or schizophrenia or any of these traumas. What do you think was the indicator for us that these intrusive thoughts weren't going to go away?
Their environment.
Their environment, yeah. Their parents just not getting it. That's fine. She's just looking, look, this is what she does. I told her she couldn't have her phone, and now she's gonna tell us she's gonna kill herself. Every single time. Look, if you tell me, whatever it is you tell me, I have to believe you. I have to. Because if I can't trust what you're saying, how are we having a relationship? That goes for literally any relationship. The only difference here is a life is on the line. So when they tell you, we believe them. It doesn't matter what the 15 other times they said it was. It doesn't matter. Because in my mind, they're going to get better at attempting. And a lot of them are accidents. There was a couple years where in the music industry, there was a lot of overdoses, but they were accidental overdoses. When you do some digging, you find out these people were clinically depressed, drinking copious amounts of alcohol, and then mixing that with Xanax, and mixing that with Ambien, and mixing that with... These people around them, nobody said, hey man, we should probably take you to see a therapist, bro. Let's go see a psychiatrist. Let's go talk to a priest, a rabbi, literally anybody. And so you had bodies just dropping, right? Here's a kind of adjacent version of suicide. That person in your life that you know is miserable, and they've been miserable for about 20 years, and you know they kind of have a drinking problem, but we don't really say anything about it. Then they develop cirrhosis of the liver, and we're like, well, no shit, right? Would we call that suicide? By definition, no. But why is that different than somebody taking their own life, like immediately? The difference is intervention, intervening. We get afraid to confront the issue. But if we cared about that person, wouldn't we? I would. And again, if my uncle hates me because I'm saying, bro, I don't want you to die from drinking, then he can hate me. But I gotta say something. Because now that's on my conscience. It came across my space, across my area. And here's the why. The why is because our next generation is watching, and they're observing us. And regardless of the work that we do, they're not gonna remember us for that pool we did in Encinitas. They're not gonna remember us for the other spa that we did over here. They're gonna remember us for the impact we made on their life. And if you don't believe me, talk to literally any teenager. Any teenager right now. I'm not saying like little kids, because I don't know how trustworthy they are. But teens, they'll tell you the truth. Teens don't give a shit, they'll tell you the truth. Now, my dad's a jerk, he works all the time, he's never home. I'm pretty sure he doesn't care about me. Wow, that's powerful. So we are the holders of the responsibility, but we also have the solution. It's to show up, it's to be present. So our language matters. One of the things that, and again, I don't like to discuss this because there's so many different things that we get into. But unfortunately, it has seeped into my craft, so as I am, I have to tell the truth. Now we say in our culture that someone committed suicide. Now this is just a small reframe. If I'm grieving and somebody said, I'm sorry to hear that your son committed suicide. How's that ring in your ears? How's that hit?
Like there's some blame there,
Like there's blame. Do we know where committed came from?
I don't know, like getting a person to a
No. No, mental health was trying to reframe all that. Committed comes from the cardinal sins. Sorry for those of you out there religious, but as a therapist, I can abide by that. Because it's not up to me to make that judgment. My job is to help heal. So by this one change to the mother who's grieving, I'm sorry that your son died from suicide, means the difference between a healing friend and not a friend at all. It's a very painful thing because suicide is about the person that we love, that we lost, but it's also about the people who are left here grieving. So a very small change that you could take to your communities today is if somebody is talking in that way, and my guess is that it just doesn't even resonate. Like it wouldn't even like drop because this is not information that everybody has. But we call this reparative language. And if we could help heal our neighbors, our friends, our families, our loved ones, wouldn't we want to do that? So if you take nothing else, the next time something like suicide comes up, don't be bashful about correcting someone and say, we really actually say they died by suicide. We don't say that about any other form of death. None. He committed tuberculosis. You know, he gave himself, the herpes. Now he died from it. I don't even know if he died from that. Right? We don't put the blame, like you said, James, we don't put the blame on the victim. Does that make sense? It's a very small step in going in an attempt at healing the people around us. Okay? Any questions so far? No questions? A safe time for questions. All right.
Yes,
Yes.
reparative language, I like that. So you're saying, say that again, as far as versus committed suicide, your preference is he died of suicide, or she.
Well, it wouldn't be my preference. It would be the preference for the person that is healing.
Correct.
So if somebody came up to me and it felt disparaging, like he had done, like my son had done something, I don't want to talk to you. That feels like we would never say that about somebody who got raped. And if we do, we know how that goes. We're like, oh, she was asking for it. Really? We would never say that. We just wouldn't. Because it's not healing. It's not, words have consequences. And so the reparative piece is for us to acknowledge that although, yes, they did this thing to themselves, that's a last-ditch effort. The pain was so great, what else was I supposed to do? And I couldn't reach out. There was nobody around me I felt safe with. And then so you run back all the stuff that we talked about in order to set it up so that there's some place for them to go. Make sense?
Yeah.
Anybody else? How are you feeling about the topic of suicide?
It's a complicated.
Yeah?
It's not something that people want to talk about, as you know. I keep wondering, I keep thinking about, so the individual in our chapter, and I'm going to say his name was Tyler Stewart. Shortly before he took his life, I had some short phone conversations with him because of the situation we were coming up. We were electing board members, and he, in my mind, was a prospective board member like we are here. And so I would call him, he'd call me back, we'd get back and forth conversations. And every time I talked to him, he seemed positive, he seemed happy, he was telling me about things he was doing in his life. And he told me the reason he couldn't serve on the board was because he was taking classes at night to become a yoga instructor, and he was very passionate about that. And he talked to me about possibly offering yoga lessons to the chapter. I thought that's I'm thinking outside the box, that's awesome. And then when I called him again, the final time I talked to him, he told me he was moving to Kauai to start over, starting new life. And I thought, wow, I wish I was young again and could just up and move to Kauai and start my life over. And it was shortly after that Mark, who we just were talking with, let me know that he had died. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to have you come speak here. but just, is that common with people who die by suicide, that to everyone around them, they seem happy, they seem like nothing's wrong, and what are some ways that, obviously we're not experts, we're not therapists, but is there a way that we can talk and maybe hear some things, hear some words, and say, hey, I was talking to, so-and-so, and he seemed okay, but then he said this.
Yeah. So there's with the population that we're talking about, right? You're talking about a person who hid their pain very well. So their goal wasn't to not ever do this. So I have clients who completed suicide that you knew that they were going to do it. They've been hospitalized, they've been in treatment, they've been all these places, and you knew at some point that they were going to do it because that's what they needed to do. That's how they saw the world. That the only way to end all of my pain, through medication, through therapy, through groups, through yoga, through all of these different things, was to end this pain this way. I have to do this. So when you're saying I'm looking for something, yeah, there's things that you could look for. But if a person is set on killing themselves, then they will. We don't have the ability to see the future. So he did a really good job of masking his pain with all of these things that were not enough to help heal what was really going on. Right? And I wouldn't say, and this isn't a knock to you, but like, I would say, what did his parents see, or what did his girlfriend or boyfriend see? What did the people around him that were super close with him see on a daily basis? Because you got to see something, a projection of his life, not necessarily the nuts and bolts of it. Because my guess would be he was hanging out by a thread. But he wanted to show the world, I'm fine. And then we go back to the stereotypes of being a man in our country. We gotta be a man, you talk about your feelings. Right? And again, what do we do with that? Well, we have a conversation like this. We trust ourselves in the care of our friends and our family, the people that we love. Unfortunately, that's not how it went down for me. I will say this though, the fact that it motivated you to do something, to act that way, is exactly what you need to do. Because what I'm really hearing from you, and not to get into a therapy session, but really what I'm hearing from you is that residual pain that his life has impacted you. In a negative way on the one hand, and now in a positive way. So there's a part of us that grieves, but then we take action. Yeah? So when we have close relationships with these people, we might see mood changes. We might see them giving away. That's an old, I'm not sure the validity of that, of like giving things away. But I do know you could see the differences in behaviors for certain kids, for certain adults. Their lives start to be a little more isolated, be a little more quiet. Okay? Especially if you're talking about that population of older white men. They're not going to broadcast and be like, hey guys, just by the way, don't come over for Super Bowl. I'm going to be very busy that day. It's not going to happen. They're planning this because the pain is so great. And this is the only answer that I have for this, which,
What percentage, I'm curious, of married couple versus single men?
Not a clue.
That'd be interesting.
No, that would be a very interesting one. They didn't break it, the CDC didn't break that down that way. But my guess would be, of that 80%, it's got to be pretty high. Or if you look at the rates of married people in our country, it's like 50%. So about 80, maybe 50% of it. Yeah.
How about financial issues?
Same thing. It would be, we look at a lot of like embarrassment, loss. So like things that are embarrassing for people who die by suicide, losing their job. We saw a lot of that after the 08. There was a lot of suicide after 08. COVID, there was a lot of loneliness. It's interesting because it's not big. You would think that they're big ticket items, but they're really life changes. So like, if you lost your job, you just go get another job. Makes sense, right? No? It depends, right? So you could see that side of things. If you lost your job, whatever happened, you just lost your ability to, say you broke your back and you couldn't dig pools, you couldn't put in spas, you couldn't travel the places, I think that's where you were traveling all over, you were bound to a chair. That could be grounds for suicide because it's a life-altering thing. But if we step back and we take a breath and we get some help, maybe we say, what could I do? Instead of this was taken from me, what could I do? And this is where we go to the protective factors. If we have people around us that can help support us when we have these losses, when we have these rejections in life, it makes it easier to rebound. And when we rebound, we call that resilience, which is why I named my company Resilient You. Because every single one of us has been through some things. And being through things, being through hard times, makes you resilient. You bounce back. So that's really what I really want to get across to you guys, is to be available and be open to the possibility that you could help someone that you didn't even know was suffering.
I got a question, Ruben. One time or another, who would have ever thought about it? I mean, I put a Glock 40 in my mouth. I almost blew my head off. Because I went through a trauma when I got shot in Michigan, deer hunting, 12-gauge slug. But I look back now, everything happened for a reason in life. But one time or another, because of traffic, everybody goes, right? Nobody? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But again, I appreciate your vulnerability. Again, that's another aspect of this, like having the space to feel vulnerable, to be able to say those things, and not have that shock factor. It's a tough thing to discuss, but I really find hope in having conversations about it. Because it takes a lot of courage to ask for help. To me, that's not weakness. To me, that's not the opposite of machismo. It's actually quite opposite. And I have these discussions with my own family. Very manly men. I don't know how to fix a car. Shit. So I got a mechanic. I can afford a mechanic. But apparently you're not a man if you don't know how to fix your car. Right? So we have these stereotypes about things, and they're just not true. They're just not true. But we don't feel safe to be able to present that to the people around us. So be that person that can be safe. Anything else?
Yeah, I would say it really resonated with me, what you said about I'd rather them hate me for life than to lose them. But I wonder, like, yeah, how do you know when they're giving those signs besides just the change of behavior? Like James was saying, you know, the persona out here is I'm good, things are good, I got things lined up, but really in there it's blocked off. So like, are there key words or actions that you might be able to see that raises that flag?
In this case.
And I was just going to dovetail on what Alicia's saying here. For most of us in this room, or a lot of us in this room, we only see each other once a month. Or we see each other in a very controlled environment, like a supply house or something like that. We're not, I mean, I know there's friends among, each other among the group, but most of these, you guys, I'll see you at Superior or SCP or here, and we have 30 seconds to a minute. How's it going? Hey, good. How you doing? Hey, raise them. Top things. Yeah, let's not get it. And we don't really have time to communicate or listen to people and look for signs or look for changes in.
But you did. You did. Right? Tyler's gone.
Right.
But you're doing it.
I was saying, like, is there something we can do before? I mean, and full disclosure, I want to make sure that people know, I didn't really know Tyler. I knew him because he was in a chapter, and I was going through a list of names, and here's a guy, and just called him. So I learned about him and talking to him on the phone. Mark knew him very well, and that's why Mark gave me the news. But I wish there were a way that you could learn to talk to somebody in the briefest of moments and recognize something's changed about this person. And other than the obvious, Obviously, you see a person who's always happy, and you see them that day, and they're raging angry. That's.
Well, I think one of the things that I brought up was this idea of being present. And I know you only have a minute or 30 seconds with these people, but you can feel what people are going through if you're present. But if we're constantly moving to the next thing because I'm so busy in my day, I'm gonna probably miss that cue. And again, that's not incumbent on me, I didn't do it. But if you're asking for a way to be able to be more in touch with others around me, then I would say, when I have that minute and a half, make sure it's a meaningful minute and a half that I'm seeing that person. Because again, if I run into you and I'm like, hey James, how's it going? And you see my 4 kids running around like crazy, I'm still gonna take a moment, just a beat, to be like, it's good seeing you, man. And that could be the difference, because I'm training myself to be in that moment with that person. And that's what being present is about. And so if you're asking for a tool, that tool to me would be being present for them, holding that space for them, even in the shortest of time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right, guys. Thank you so much. I have business cards here. If you have any questions, you want to email me. I'm always open to be a resource. I do have the it's uptous.org. It's the San Diego branch of, they've changed all these hotlines and stuff. 988 is the hotline for nationwide. They changed that from like a full number. San Diego's is 1-888-724-7240. And so you have 2 numbers and a website, and there's tons of information out there on this stuff. And the numbers I got were from the CDC, but the WHO and I mean, literally any hospital will have any of these postings for more information. Okay? All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, no problem.
I really appreciate it. It's a lot to know. I'm not going to elaborate on anything Hector said. I think he said everything, and it would just be. I do have a couple, going back to the business of tonight's meeting.